Hello and welcome to the deVere live webinar series. This is our 27th live webinar. My name is William Trayford and I'm delighted to be welcoming you to Millennial Investing 3.0. And today we are focusing on completing your financial wish list for 2020. Not many days left, 37 I believe. So today we are joined by two of deVere's best wealth consultants. We have Deshawn, Peterson and Beatrice, Murgia, who are going to be presenting to us on the topics that you need to know to complete your financial checklist. Okay, so before I hand over to them, I'll just run through what the format is going to be for today. So first of all, we're going to run a poll. We want to know what's top of your financial checklist. I'll then be handing over to our two presenters, Deshawn and Bea, who will be doing, I'm sure, an excellent presentation. And throughout that presentation, I'm sure that you'll have questions. So what you can do, you'll see at the bottom of your screen is a chat box. In that chat box, I want you to write your questions in there. And what I'll do at the end of the presentation is actually I'll put those questions to Deshawn and to Bea, and we'll get those for you. If you're really keen, you can even raise your hand and ask them in person, like we did in the previous webinar. After the Q&A, what we'll then do is give you the opportunity to reach out and get more information specifically to your situation, put into action what you've heard today. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch the first poll. So what is top of your financial wish list? Is it to be free of debt? Is it to start investing, to buy a property, to increase or diversify your existing investments, to have an emergency fund, to have protection for your family, or is it something else? A long list for you to choose from, and put that on your wish list, and you never know, maybe we can get that sorted before the end of 2020. So Bea, if you want to turn on your camera and turn on your mic, Bea will be doing the first half of the presentation, and then she will be handing over to Deshawn later on. And with that, Bea, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Will. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. What we're going to do in this webinar, just like Will said, is we're going to see how to complete your financial wish list before the end of this year. Now, what we're going to discuss is to start with how to use two daily apps as a powerful tool to track our expenses. After that, we're going to see how we can pay ourselves by savings, and then we see also how much we should spend ideally and how much we should save on a monthly basis. And then finally, we see how to establish the real financial goals. So get ready, because the first part is quite interactive. Now, the two apps I'm going to talk about are Alipay and WeChat. For those of us that live in China, we use these two apps basically every day to pay for our expenses, to buy goods, and also, for example, to pay rent or to pay for utility bills, to pay for transportation. Now, while these two apps are used to pay, they also have a function that help us to track the expenses. Now, if you mainly use WeChat, what you can do is you go on Me, WeChat Pay, then you press on Wallet, and on top on the right, you should see Transaction. Now, in this part, you will see how much you have received, but also how much you have spent in the past month. Now, with Alipay, it's a little bit easier, as you go on Me and you have Transaction directly. Now, in these two parts, you can see how much you've actually spent on average in the past months. This is a very useful tool to see how much we spend on a monthly basis to set up a benchmark, mostly for our emergency funds. Now, emergency fund is something that I'm going to explain to you in a minute. Now, let's see how much we should save, but mainly how to save it. The way to save, the simplest one, is to have two different types of bank accounts. Now, the first type of bank account we should have is for saving. As the golden rule says, save before you spend. So in the savings bank account, we deposit part of our salary, and mostly we make sure we do not connect this bank account to any paying platform. Now, as we just mentioned, it can be WeChat, it can be Alipay, some people use Apple Pay. So any of these platforms should not be connected to this bank account. and we deposit there what we want to save. Now, on the other hand, we have another bank account. This bank account is the one that allows us to purchase any goods and to pay for any needs. So, simplest way to save, have two different types of bank accounts. Now, let's see how we can pay ourselves. As I've just mentioned, you should have in place your emergency funds. Emergency funds are represented by the average expenses based on 3 to 6 months. Now, you might be wondering, why do I need emergency funds? Very simple. We need these funds for rainy days. These are the funds that we never touch if it's not an emergency, like the name says. After that, we can save a little bit extra compared to what we spend, okay? And then finally, the best way to pay ourselves is to actually plan for our future. Now, you might be wondering how much you should actually save. Now, there is a very simple rule. We can set it in place. This rule is the 50-20-30 rule. So, again, to start with, have your emergency funds in place and then move into saving. Now, 50% of what is your monthly income should be definitely used to pay for what is essential. Now, what is essential is, for example, paying for rent, paying for utility bills, pay for transportation, pay for food. Now, these four cannot be avoided. After that, we should destine 20% of what we earn on a monthly basis for our savings. How does that happen? Every time we receive our monthly income, we take 20% of that and we deposit it into the savings bank account we have. We can think about it as a sort of a piggy bank that we used to have when we were kids, just more an adult version of it. Now, finally, we are left with 30%. Now, this 30% is what we can use to enjoy life. What does it mean? That we can use it, for example, to go out for lunch, dinner, to go traveling with our friends, anything that is considered an extra. Now, even though we have this 30% extra that can be used for have fun, we don't need to use it all. And it's actually advisable if you can to save part of it. However, that is a personal choice. Now, with that, I'm going to pass it on to Deshawn, who is going to explain you how to actually invest even though you have a debt or loan, and how to set up your financial goals.
Hey everyone. Thank you, Bea. Yeah, so I guess to piggyback on what she's saying, we're really just going to talk about the things, or the most common thing I come across is debt management. So it's no secret that student loan is not only a U.S. problem or a UK or Canada, Australia problem. It's a generational problem, right? There's more than $2 trillion US in student debt, but we don't want to look at it as a hurdle that should prevent you from actually saving for your future. So when you think about maintaining those minimum payments, or as Bea mentioned, paying yourself first, don't feel bad for the banks, right? They are in the business of lending money. So the longer you pay, the more interest you pay, and the happier they are because you're paying for their profits. But in the sacrifice or the opportunity cost of actually choosing to, maintain the minimum payments, you should be thinking and just taking the advantage of that time to actually save for yourself, because those banks aren't going out of business anytime soon, but also your own financial freedom is yours and your decision responsibly alone. So on this chart, we can actually look at it as let's say you have a 15-year window and you want to do two things with once. So here in the green, we have the loan. And then at the bottom, we have the investments. So let's say, for example, your actual loan is 50 grand, it's $50,000 US, and you only have a fixed amount each month. So you're spending about, let's say, a total of $550, whereas you're going to put $300 or $350 towards the loan each month, and only $200 each month towards your own investments. Now, as you can see with this chart, even though you are going to be paying some interest for the opportunity cost, as that loan decreases, the contributions that you will be earning from the actual investments will be going from the bank or from the loan to the actual investments for yourself. So at the same time, you're again hitting two birds with one stone. So don't think about it in absolute terms when you're thinking about, I have to pay off all my loans by this time because I want to be debt free, so I can't actually invest. Or on the other end, whereas I only want to invest and I'm just going to defer my loan because we know that student loans can actually be considered a healthy credit or a healthy debt because it is affording you their current career in some shape, way, capacity, or even being here in the mainland, it affords you the visa. Now we also want to use that same opportunity cost in affording you the time to save for your future. So here's just a broad stroke view as far as just maintaining a certain amount of payments for the loans. And over time, those loans will become smaller, but also your investments will grow at the same time. Now, if we look here on the next slide, we want to look at one of the biggest things I actually come across, right, is everyone comes to us, whether it's me, Bay, or even Trayford. I want to invest. Okay, why? I want to buy Tesla. Why? I want to buy Apple. I want to buy ETFs. I want to get in the S&P. I want to buy Baba. I want to buy Tencent. I want to buy JD. But why, right? I truly believe that most people do not want to be rich. Most people, right? I believe most people actually want to be comfortable. And after a certain point, I want to say maybe your late 20s, maybe your 30s, you realize these are the things I like to do. Here are the friends I have. Here's where I live. And here is the cost to do those things. But in order to do all those things, we know it takes money. So the difference between goals and dreams is that dreams are just things you want to do, and goals are things you can actually quantify. So here on the right side, I want to save money. Okay, what for what? What are we saving money for? Interest rates are low. Inflation is the invisible enemy. But what are you going to use the money for? Here on the other side, you can actually see, okay, emergency funds by May 2021. Okay, that is a goal because we can track it, we can save it, we can use Alipay and WeChat to actually get an average of your monthly expenditure. And we can benchmark it against your salary to see what you can actually save on a month-to-month basis to reach that goal. I want to invest. Again, another dream. Or I just want to do something, right? Similar to like, oh, I want to lose weight, but no one wants to, say, here's my schedule to work out. Here's my nutritional plan. I want a retirement plan saving $300 a month beginning 2021. Now that is a goal. So now we have less than 40 days to actually reach that goal or even put ourselves in a position to do it. We have a set amount, we have a deadline, and as we know is a retirement plan. So we know it will actually fall in a certain category of investment. Now here's the third one. Maybe I would buy stocks. Okay, for what? Now, whether you invest in equity, stocks, ETF, index funds, bonds, Bitcoin, commodities, gold, oil, etc., there should be a reason and a why for why you do anything. Because just moving in the dark and just buying things, investments really have to be aiming in the same direction. So if you have a whole bunch of gold and a whole bunch of oil, and you're saying this is my retirement, how do those things trend over a 10, 20, 30-year plan? Now we want to think about is I want to invest the extra cash in my bank account this month because I know that interest rates and inflation aren't helping my cash grow. Now that is a why you want to buy stocks. This is a why. So these are the biggest things I really want everyone to sit down with themselves because there's for you to actually have a financial plan, there should be a goalpost, right? There should be a number. There should be some way for you to quantify your progress because if not, it's going to be an ever moving target. You're never going to actually track it. You're not going to be motivated. And then you'll wake up living in China 5, 10 years later, and you only have some cool Instagram pictures, 20,000 RMB in the bank, and you go home and everyone's going to look at you and say, okay, what were you doing over there if you have no, quantifiable assets or ways to show I was over there for work. So we really have to sit down with ourselves and write down our goals. Now here on the next slide, here is a more ideal or practical term as far as what are some real goals. As as we know here, everyone wants to retire, or retirement is something that we all will know, because automation and just age and just economies, they change. Your skills are out of date, and whether you want to transition or not, retirement is something that is inevitable. At some point, you will not be, how can you say, hire, you won't be hiring material, but it doesn't mean that you should have no money. So if we look at this mountain or this timeline, your emergency fund should be your foundation easily, because COVID in 2020 has proven that even living in here in the second largest economy, your income, your salary, your company is not guaranteed. And you and yourself alone are the only person responsible for your expenses. And your emergency fund should definitely reflect that. If you're single, again, between 3 and 6 months. If you have a serious relationship with a partner who you're making financial decisions with, it should cover 6 to 8 months. And if you have a family, easily 10 to 12 months of monthly expenditure. Next, after you have that foundation, start saving your 20% of your salary, so you can just again continue that habit of saving. And then we get into something more concrete, such as a retirement plan. Purchasing your first investment property by age 35. Again, a real goal. Being able to quantify, give yourself a deadline, and hold yourself accountable, whether you do it by yourself, with your partner, or even work with one of us as a financial advisor. And then you can, again, the end of the road, right? Example, retiring at 55, paying yourself with an income of 60,000 US per year. Now, these are one, two, three, four, five goals, right? But it takes a lifetime to achieve them. Not saying that this is yours, but when you think about your own financial freedom, or starting 2021, have you even sat down with yourself and asked, how much am I spending per month? Is it out of control? Whether you're going crazy on the YMI or the Taobao, or going out, or just squandering your money on, knickknacks and just purchases that are unnecessary. And then on the other end of that, putting yourself in a position to actually say, okay, if it was me, for example, Deshawn, what do I want? Whether you want to buy a house in Shanghai or Thailand, Arizona, Berlin, Australia, it doesn't matter, right? Actually writing it down, and then just looking at yourself and asking, okay, what is a reasonable amount of money that I want to retire on? And then you can actually say, okay, 2020 happened. How can I make the first step for 2021 to achieve these things? So this is just I would say, a practical way to actually look at how to achieve financial freedom. Now, here on the next slide, questions, anyone? Now, we really wanted this opportunity to, give you some practical advice, because 2020 was unprecedented. It was hard. A lot has happened, but we're still here. So that doesn't mean that we should live in the past, but we should be a lot more optimistic on the future. So I do see some questions in the chat.
Excellent.
So I'm going to give it back to Trayford.
Thank you, Deshawn. Brilliant. And Bea, if you want to turn on your camera as well and stop sharing the screen, and then everyone can see all of us. Brilliant. Yeah, that's excellent information, guys. Thank you so much. And yes, we have had questions coming in before, and also in the chat as well. But what I want to do first of all is end the poll. And actually, before I share the results, just to remind people, the chat box at the bottom, you can put your questions in there, fire them in, and we should have time for them to get them in the webinar. So let me share these results. So what is top of your financial wish list? It's to increase or diversify your existing investments. So Deshawn, I'll come to you first. Is that surprising, considering the expats that you meet, especially millennial expats?
No. I would say that most of the people I'm coming across, I won't say diversifying, but how can they allocate their assets to work in a synchronized strategy? I think that there's so much information out there, and plenty of people understand the value of investing, but the strategy behind it is a bit of an unknown, right? What strategies for me? Because whether you're watching Bloomberg, BBC, you're watching my YouTube, or anything along those lines, how do you know what strategies for you? So even if you're buying all these stocks, equities, bonds, and things like that, is it for you, or is it just because accredited source told you that, oh, this is a buy.
Yeah, but it's definitely good news that people have already started. You know, the actual starting investing was quite low, which means presumably if they're on this webinar, they're already thinking about it and actually have made some steps already, which is good to see, right? Excellent. So Bea, I just want to ask you your opinion on what was on the other end of that poll. Was actually that nobody in this webinar was planning to get debt free. So either that means they have no debt, or they're not bothered about it and just happy to leave it there. What do you think it is, given your experience of meeting expats here?
Well, from my experience, what I've noticed is that most people here in China, they actually do not have a debt, or those that do is mainly a student loan, and depends really on the country. Like some countries is very important to repay it. Some countries, you know, because the interest is so low, they won't even bother repaying it. Some people might have debt on their credit cards, but that's most of it. I've never seen someone like with, you know, a huge debt to repay. So I'm not surprised to see that on a poll.
Okay, good. Well, that's good to know. I think maybe expats here are managing their debt better than most in other parts of the world. So Francesca has asked, and this is probably directed at you, Deshawn, it's about your part of the presentation, about the 60K USD annual retiring at 55 years old. Was that based on $300 savings per month?
Yes. So that answered two questions at once. Okay. So the 60K USD per year is just based on the idea that if you retire, how much do you want to pay yourself? And the $300 a month is an entry point for which you would start saving. So I'm not going to say that saving $300 a month and you're getting, let's say, 7% year over year, it's going to reach that goal. It's not a one-stop shop. But if you were to start a retirement plan and say you're saving it for 15, 20, 30 years, over time, of course, your salary increase. Of course, you'll get older. You'll probably be a lot more mature with your money. So you'll be able to increase it. But I want to outline it as you could just start with $300, which is about 2,002 RMB. And just, again, you can still make that goal achievable.
Okay, excellent. So a starting point, but you need to work on it as time went by. So Dione has asked, first of all stated, I'm an American. I'm unsure of my goal. I want to start investing again, but I have just under 20K left in debt, so I want to pay that off. I have 10K ready to drop by December 31st before the forbearance lifts in US, but should I wait to see what the president-elect does? Well, I'd better direct that towards the American, hadn't I, Deshawn?
That's actually a great question. Okay, this is not considered personal financial advice unless you sit down with me, but I am going to answer the question. One, what that other slide actually I really wanted to communicate is just the opportunity cost, right? 20 grand, okay, it's not a large number, but it is a large number because of the mental burden of it, right? But think about if you invested that 10 grand today, and you just build up some more savings, or you continue to pay off the debt over time. Because the thing about rushing to pay off debt versus investing is that the debt doesn't go away, but the days you have left to invest are extremely limited, because we can never invest yesterday. And, you know, the saying is, when is the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When's the best time? Again, today. So I really want you to consider, and I'll probably send you like a link or something to think about how much that 10 grand will actually be worth in, say, 10 years, 20 years, versus if you pay off the loan in another 2-3 years and you start the process over. But also the president-elect, what he will or will not do, I have my own opinions about that, the student forgiveness, but that's a rabbit hole I don't think we have enough time for. But that's just my opinion on that.
Excellent, thank you. And Bea, actually, I'm going to dissect another part of that question for you, which sort of dropped in there, but unsure of my goals. And I think that's, I would say relatively common. I mean, what do you think when you're sitting down with millennials especially? at this, at that age, they might be 20, 30 years away from the dreaded retirement. Are they really clear on their goals from the ones that you meet?
Most of the time they're not. As in, most of the time they want to start investing. They want to buy shares. They hear news here and there, and they come to you with the idea of, I want to do that, but then they don't have a clear goal. Because when we sit down, we see what we could potentially achieve and what they should do to achieve it. But normally what I've seen is that no one knows exactly what he wants when he's in the early 20s, which is normal, I guess. It changes a little bit in time, but it's not for everyone. I mean, I met people who were even younger who had a very clear idea of what they wanted to do, and even older people that were still, thinking about it.
Yeah, definitely. And any advice there for Deshawn on setting goals, how to go about it? If you really sat there going, well, I don't know what I want to do in 20 years, and what are the numbers I need to put around that? I mean, any advice on helping to set those goals?
I think this is a very, how can I put this in words? I believe everyone already has their goals, but I think most people don't want to write down the number because it makes it real. I think quantifying it makes it real, and therefore you are now accountable. So now you can no longer say, I don't know. You can never play ignorant. Don't want to use it in a negative sense, but for example, if you want to buy a house, and let's, as the resident American, if you want to buy a house and you don't want to live in New York or LA, but you can get a decent house for, let's say, average house, 200 grand, and you want to put down 30%. So now we can quantify, we need $60,000. Goal set. I want to buy a house. I want to live in Thailand. Okay. Same scenario. I want to buy a $200,000 apartment in Chiang Mai. I'm a foreigner. I get a mortgage. I have to put down 50%. So now we need 100,000. So now we're quantifiable. I want to start investing. Okay. Back to Bea's point. You're making 30,000 RMB a month, even if you start at the 20, right? 6,000 a month savings. Now it's quantifiable. So I think the goal setting isn't as difficult as people making it, but I think the accountability factor makes people a lot more fearful of actually writing those things down.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes it more real, doesn't it? And then that's perhaps something we're not ready for. Okay, so a couple of questions coming in. First one I'm going to fire to you, Deshawn, from Batul. I want to be boss of my own company, I assume. I want to start my own business project, like build an app, etc. But I'm scared because I don't have savings. Is it a good idea to start my own thing or wait until I have enough savings?
Emergency fund. It's just no way around it. One, is highly respectable, to be an entrepreneur, because entrepreneurs are the ones who are, leading the world, right? They are the people who are giving the new ideas. Small businesses are by far the largest employers across every country, right? Starting your own company online, you're paying taxes, etc. But I don't want to be the bearer of bad news. It might not work out. It just might not. And even when you're thinking on the other end of that, like, oh, I'm gonna be a billionaire. On the other end of that, you might just be in stricken poverty, and it will still be your responsibility on both ends. So it'll be your reward, but also it'll be your punishment for failing. So now, don't want to be too dismal, but if you're going to be an entrepreneur, I would say at least have a year's worth of salary before you go out on your own, or just, again, love your 9 to 5 and just pursue your entrepreneurship, 5 to 9. Doesn't mean you have to go all in. You can be more practical.
It's what many do, isn't it? They start a business while they're still working, and then shift over once it's clear that the business is going to work and it needs more of their time, and they jump in, don't they? Okay, so Bea, I've got a question for you from Francesca. She says, so let's say that I start to put aside these $300 a month. After 1 year, it's $2,600 that she saved. This money will get a percentage of interest or growth. If yes, what percentage? Worst case scenario and best case scenario. I'll give that to you, Bea.
Okay, well, To start with, when you save this amount, like correctly, she says, in total, I would have saved 3,600 USD. This money gets invested. To start with, what we analyze is the risk profile of the person. So if a person is not afraid of volatility in the investment, then we can look at a return that is an average of 8%. If someone is not that keen on volatility on the plan, normally we'll look into something that has an average of 4%. Now, this doesn't mean that every year you're going to get 4% or 8% fixed. What is going to happen is, in order for you to build up that amount, you're going to invest into a plan that uses dollar cost averaging, which means basically that the funds you're going to invest in are going to be bought into units. Now, when the value of the fund is lower, you're actually going to buy less units. When the value of the fund is higher, you're going to buy more units. But these units will accumulate, generating you an extra. So at the end of the plan, you will definitely have more than what you have invested, because this is long term. So there's not, to answer the question, basically, there's not fixed return. It might vary, but to start with, it'll vary according to the person, what a person is willing to risk, and also according to the length of the plan. Of course, the longer the plan, the more chances to earn on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Risk is such an important part of that question, isn't it, really? And it's really where you need to understand the individual more. But I guess what, Deshawn, I mean, I'll ask you this one, but obviously based on that, looking at percentage and what some investors or inexperienced investors probably more likely will think of is, oh, well, I put money somewhere and I get interest. So what would people be doing if they're sat in euros or dollars or pounds, developed market currencies with interest rates where they are? What are they going to be doing if they want to put money into something that's a fixed interest, like cash deposits or bonds or whatever?
Take that money out and put it under your bed, because it'll probably make the same amount of interest. All right, I don't want to get too much jargon. So financial crisis happened 2008, 2009. Interest rates were already at 0. 12 years later, the markets were soaring, but interest rates still remain 0. COVID happened. We can't predict these things. Recessions are to be expected, but it can't be planned. Now we're in a place where countries are now debating negative interest rates, right? It's places like Japan, Switzerland, right? So the banks are actually charging you to leave your money in the bank, right? Because they want you to not save money in the bank. They want you to spend it to help stimulate the economy. So if you are putting your money and you get that buzzy, that tingly feeling when you see a large number on your ATM or your checking account, you're like, well, look at all this money I saved. If it is money that is above your emergency fund, it should be invested, right? Just because cash only has value when it's being spent. Now, when you're thinking of actual interest rates and things like that, the two things you really want to consider are interest rates, so 0, and then inflation. So if you're from like US, UK, Australia, Switzerland, they're aiming for 2%. So if your money is in the bank on an annual basis, you're losing 2% per annum in purchasing power. So you want, as Bea mentioned, you want, again, if you're even conservative, you want to be hitting at least 4%, so that you can at least not only beat inflation, but at the same time still get a little bit of yield that can be reflected in, I guess, the compound interest. And these are the two things you really, really, really want to think about when you're just sitting there with money in your account and you're just thinking, I don't want to lose this money. But in actual terms, you're actually losing it to the invisible killer, inflation.
Yeah, it's such an important thing for us all to consider about leaving money in the bank, and it seems quite hopeless for some people that perhaps don't understand investing. And that leads us nicely on, really, to something that we wanted to offer everybody who is attending this webinar. Obviously, there's a lot of information today, and I think you'll gather from a lot of the answers that we've given to some of the questions is that actually your individual situation is so important, but some people are not sure what to do next. Where should they go? So what we're offering is a 15-minute discovery call, where what you can do is actually you can talk to one of our advisors talk to us for 15 minutes and just throw us questions. Throw us questions about anything about your situation, air some of your background, and just find out what you should be doing. Okay, there's a real no commitment 15-minute call. So if you'd like to book a discovery call, what we'll do is we'll send you an email within 15 minutes after the webinar. You'll receive an email where you can book a time. So just click I'd like to book a call, or if you're not interested at the moment, you can just put not yet, and we'll reach out to you afterwards. Okay, and with that, Deshawn and Bea, I'd like to say thank you so much for your excellent presentations, and thank you for answering our questions. Excellent presentations today. And also for everyone who's attended, thank you for sending in your questions. Thank you for attending. And if you're not already, we have a WeChat webinar group. So if you're not part of that group already, reply to who invited you, or reply to the email, the Zoom email with the link, and you should be able to get in contact with us and let us know that you want to be in that group. Lots of discussions about upcoming webinars and previous webinars that we've just had. And to everyone else, good luck for the rest of the year. Only 1 month till Christmas, and 2020 is coming to a close. We have one more webinar this year in 2 weeks' time. It's going to be a good one. Make sure you look out for that. Thank you, everybody. Good evening.